Tigard City Council meeting to order. City Recorder Krager, please call roll.
Mayor Lube.
Here.
Youth Councilor Vogel.
Here.
Councilor Shaw.
Here.
Councilor Singh. Councilor Wolf.
Here.
Council President Hu.
If everyone will please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, everyone. City teammates or council, do you have any non-agenda items this evening?
Nothing for us, Mayor, or from us.
Okay. Seeing none, I did just want to talk to the community. Last night we did have a hit and run on Hall Boulevard, and there is an investigation underway of the individual looking for the car. If you have any information that may help, please contact Detective Casey Mace at 503-718-1800 or Casey, KACI.mace, M-A-C-E, at tigard-or.gov. Thank you so much. The next item on our agenda is public comment. If you'd like to phone in for public comment, please do so now to get in the queue. The phone number is 503-966-4101. And anyone wishing to comment in person, there is a sign up at the front of the room. First, we will start off with follow-up to previous public comment with Assistant City Manager Nyland.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. At last week's council meeting, we did not receive any written public comment, but we did have 3 individuals who provided testimony. All 3 provided comments about the Edgewood Cottage Cluster development, and all 3 did receive a follow-up explaining the process and providing context if they had further comments or questions. So now on to a relevant and timely fun fact. Today is National Voter Registration Day. You can register to vote or confirm your status by visiting iwillvote.com. Everyone has a voice, and voting is an excellent way to use that voice. So thanks for your time, and that's my report for tonight.
Thank you. And I'll just say, talking with friends across the country, I so appreciate the way that Oregon does our voting by mail and just really lowers the barrier to make it easier to vote. I was talking with a friend in a different state, and I was like, oh yeah, the voter's pamphlet, it comes, and I read through it, and she was like, what? Talking about the hours and hours that she spends trying to research everything. So, and also just automatic voter registration, getting your license or ID. I think it's just incredible. So another testament to the state of Oregon. But you can always check, make sure everything is up to date. It's super easy online to do at the Secretary of State website. So thank you for that fun fact. The next item on our agenda is written public comment. We did receive 1 written comment yesterday by noon from Jenny Huizinga, and it was regarding safety at crosswalks on McDonald and 100th Avenue. She's requesting additional safety enhancements at the McDonald Street and 100th Avenue crosswalk. They use it daily to walk to school and often have to wait 5 or 6 cars to pass before they stop and let them cross the street. Thank you for your comment. Next item on the agenda is in-person public comment, and we do have a couple of people signed up. When it's your turn, please go ahead and come up to the microphone and turn it on. There's a button, it turns green, and you will have 2 minutes. So first individual is Denise Olson. Come on up. Welcome, Denise. Thank you. We try to be pretty friendly here.
Thanks. I've lived in Tigard, first of all, I've lived in Tigard for 35 years. I recently got acquainted with Summer Lake Park when I had to release some baby ducks that I had raised from the mother getting killed. In the park, I found fishermen everywhere. And then we found ducks and geese tangled up in the fishing line. Then I found out there's no fishing except for a spot about the size of this table in the northeast corner. I was told that by the Parks Department. They put up signs last Thursday, and the signs are gone. Next day, they're gone. My goal is to have no fishing in the park period, not just a little spot, because that's very confusing for people. On the website, it says fishing in Northeast Corner, and that's all it says. But the Northeast Corner, this is a 30-acre park. The Northeast Corner with a 10-foot square fishing. Does that make sense to anybody? I encountered 2 fishermen today, and one of the park's employees came down, spent over an hour trying to get him out of there as he was screaming. I have it all on video. And I rescued a goose, excuse me, last week. I also have that. Spent $600 on this goose to get surgery on its leg because it was entangled so bad with fishing line. We released it today. So this is what I would like to do, is to have a total ban on fishing in Summer Lake Park. We can avoid all the trash that's there from fishermen, and the line, the sinkers, the hooks, everything, and the big mouths.
Thank you so much for coming. It does look like we have your phone number,
You do.
and so we can follow up with you
Great.
based on your phone number.
Okay, I have contacted the Parks Department and ODFW and the State Patrol.
Okay?
Okay.
So we will get your email address from them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Denise. Next individual who has signed up for public comment is Gabriela Conzinora. Again, I appreciate you writing out the way to pronounce it. Welcome back. You have 2 minutes. Please make sure you turn the microphone on.
So I was here last week discussing the cluster development on Edgewood, and I'm back again to just remind everybody that there's about 85 neighbors that are opposed to it, and we're hoping that I did get a response from you guys last week to who to speak with, and I will also speak with them and pass everything along. But I will continue to come here and make comments, so that is public record. Our belief is that the cluster development is not a good fit for that neighborhood due to 21 properties on the acre. I understand that you have been to the acre and saw the old growth trees that will be destroyed, which are home to owls and squirrels and all kinds of birds. I understand that you did visit the site. We are also wanting to bring to the attention that there has been no mention of police patrols in the future if there is 21 properties that will more than likely turn into rentals. Again, I'm a realtor, so I know how these kinds of things go. They're bought inexpensively by investors, and then they're flipped into rentals, and which changes the demographic and the face of a neighborhood, brings in crime, and brings in a lot of traffic, trash, brings in people that are just guests that are spending the night there and will be parking up and down the street. So currently we have no designated parking on the side of streets, and it doesn't look like we're going to have anything for if this were to be approved. So we're opposed, and we just want to make it very clear we're going to try to do everything we can to stop the development. And that's basically what I'd like to know, is just keep being kept updated on it by City Council and the woman that I was referred to. And perfect
Thank you so
timing.
much for your time today.
Yes.
The next item on our agenda is phone-in public comment. Mr. Vang, are there any callers in the queue?
We have one caller, Daniel Thompson.
Okay. If you will let him in. It's like a game show. Let him in. Mr. Thompson?
My name.
Mr. Thompson?
Hello?
Yeah, welcome. We can hear you. If you just want to go
Okay.
ahead and introduce yourself, and then you have 2 minutes.
Yep. Yes, my name is Daniel Thompson. I've given input before to council, and I wanted to follow up on the information that Emily provided to me, and also after meeting with council. And after reviewing the documentation and comparing it to the Hall Boulevard project and going out conducting my own study, I found that the Hall Boulevard plan does not address some key issues that we face with Hall Boulevard. There are two main areas that are dangerous to vehicles and by association pedestrians. The first is McDonald and Bonita. Between 3 and 4 o'clock, I've seen this stretch back up at least half a mile. The biggest problem is that there are two stoplights too close together. There isn't enough space for the vehicles to clear the intersections. Second area is at Hunsaker and Scoffins, but it also continues through Commercial, Burnham, and also the railroad tracks. The problem, again, is too many lights intersections close together. And this problem is due to prior administrations reacting to the growth with their one-size-fits-all solution by lowering the speed limit and just putting up the traffic light. The current Hall Boulevard plan just perpetuates that problem. It creates a lot of idling cars at the stoplights, belching out pollutants, people getting frustrated and potentially making poor decisions. The wide sidewalks will not solve this problem. We need to find a solution to the whole problem. We need a safe passageway for pedestrians and a mode to move vehicles efficiently through Hall Boulevard, not stuck at some light half a mile back. I was told that Hall Boulevard still had capacity. Looking at the backup that occurs in multiple areas and how long it takes to clear out, I would say Hall Boulevard has met and exceeded its capacity. I would ask that the plan for Hall Boulevard be reevaluated to address these areas. There are simple solutions to clear out intersections quickly that haven't even been pursued or investigated. Fewer vehicles waiting 3 to 4 light cycles to cross an intersection means less chance for a frustrated vehicle or impatient pedestrian to make a bad choice.
Mr. Thompson,
So again,
2 minutes
yes,
are up,
yes.
and I want to give you the opportunity to wrap up.
Okay, I just want to say, I think the Hall Boulevard project needs to be looked at again, relating to those intersections.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your public input. The next item on our agenda are council liaison reports, where we report on our board and committee activities. Yes, Councilor Wolf, please start us off.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a few activities. Councilor Shaw and I participated in the Tax Incremental Financing Matching Grant Committee. It was the first opportunity in this fiscal year to interview, and we are in the process of awarding funding to the Sean Gardner Dancing Studio. So exciting way to kick off the year. Although not an official liaison in any stretch, I've had the opportunity, as you know, Mayor and City Manager Reimer, to participate in several Tigard-Tualatin School District events as they welcome back their staff, and had a major event at Tualatin High School. And then we toured the Alberta Ryder Cabin, which was originally the Doriot family cabin and was built around 1925 in our city of Tigard. And then finally, the very exciting opening of the Kalapuya Early Learning Center as well. So major things happening in the school district, and excited about all of those. Social Services Grants Committee, facilitated and led by our CFO, Eric King, about how do we want to evaluate and assess our social services application and evaluation of those awards. And I thought it was a really productive conversation, and that will be brought forward to the full budget committee later this fall. And then Policy Advisory Board met last week, which of course is the Washington County committee that brings representatives across all cities to evaluate the grant applications that are part of the funding from HUD. And so one of our major things was the 2022 annual report was adopted and approved, and we're in the process of gearing up for funding for this coming year. and community committee for community engagement meets tomorrow night. So thank you, Mayor.
Great. Councillor Shaw?
Great, thank you, Mayor. Hello, council members. Reporting back with regards to the Parks and Recreation Committee, and just want to check, can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks for
Great,
checking.
fantastic. We had a very enlightening meeting. The highlight I'd like to raise is with regards to a report from the Department of Forestry. They came and reported that within the state of Oregon, they now have a sighting that is actually out of the Forest Grove of the emerald ash borer. This arrived into the United States in 2012, into Michigan, into Forest Grove in December of 2022. It has not made its way to the city of Tigard nor south of the city of Forest Grove. However, the emerald ash borer is detrimental to ash trees, and that, of course, greatly impacts the canopy within the city of Tigard, both along our waterways, but also within and in front of homes. We have a disproportionate amount of share of ash, as does the state of Oregon, and so that right now there's no cure. There is some potential remedies, but it is not something that actually will stop the death of the trees, but actually slows the growth of the trees, but also slows the growth of the emerald ash borer, which is a negative consequence to the ash tree itself. So working with the Department of Forestry, this could be a potential impact for the city of Tigard along with the state of Oregon. So we'll likely be raising that during the budget session that we'll have here shortly. And that concludes my report. And I do have a presentation with regards to the emerald ash borer that I'm happy to forward if you would like. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Please go ahead and forward. Always good to have additional information. Youth Councilor Vogel, would you like to let us know what TIAC is up to?
Yeah, totally. So TIAC had a meeting last night. We welcomed one potential new member. We're looking to hopefully see them again at our next meeting on October 2nd, which is where we look to really welcome our official new members. So that will be an extended meeting. Last night we talked about future events and how we want those to align with our goals of education and houselessness. We also worked and talked about a consensus on a Halloween event that we want to work on as kind of our next thing to plan. We talked about ways to advertise and our plan to work with the Opportunity Cafe, which our president, Ariana, did have a meeting about today. We have exciting news that we'll be a booth at Tigard High School's Club Rush tomorrow to recruit some new members and hopefully spread the word about what we do for the community. At our next meeting, we're looking to just welcome everybody in, talk about the way that the committee works, and yeah, that's about it. Not too much else, so perfect, thank you.
It sounds exciting to be able to recruit new members tomorrow and get everyone excited. Thank you for that. I just will give a couple of updates. I had my Washington County coordinating meeting yesterday, and I think it was just sort of a meeting of bad-ish news, which is not a great meeting to have, and the mayors really talked about that, the general frustration level. It was multiple layers of government from ODOT and Washington County really talking about future transportation funding and not really having the same level of dollars and funding moving forward, which I think is a really frustrating thing to hear as we continue to know, some of our roads that are owned and maintained by these outside government agencies are continuing to degrade and become less and less safe, as evidence from our community member yesterday being hit. And so it's one of those things where ODOT isn't going to have the same amount of funding, and they're going to continue to focus on what they call high capacity roads, which are those really large freeways, and leaving the orphan highways, I think, even farther behind. And the county is having challenging issues, and so what we used to know as the MISTIP program is probably not going to continue in that capacity, but is going to look at something else, and that's going to have a direct impact on the individuals living in our community. Because where do you live? You live in Tigard. You don't know whether or not a road is controlled by Washington County or ODOT, and those are frequently the larger roads that everyone uses. So I think it was just overall frustrating news, but it's consistent news that I think the transportation funding mechanism in our state is kind of fundamentally broken with the gas tax and individuals moving to electric vehicles, which is a good thing for the environment, but it's becoming detrimental for maintaining the safety of our roads. So I just wanted to pass along that update as we continue to move forward in budgeting cycles, to just know that that's going to be an ongoing, continuous problem. The Metropolitan Mayors Consortium, we're really focusing on developing relationships with our legislators and letting them understand sort of how the city works, and looking at things that have gone well and things that are challenges based on the different bills that they have passed. So we're looking at a tour of Clackamas County with a little bit of Washington County, and really working on those relationships in the off season to make sure that they're understanding how it works in the city, and some of the unfunded mandates and different mandates that come down, what impact that has on how the city has to work. TTSD, as Councilor Wolf talked about, it was so fun to welcome back all of the teachers. I think New Beginnings to New Year's are very exciting, full of optimism and hope. And it was just really exciting to be there and to see our teachers and how excited they are to serve our youngest community members and most impressionable. And then visiting the Alberta Writer Cabin. I drive by it all the time and I had no idea what it was. And so now I can point to it and say that I know what it is, and really looking at future opportunities there. The only other thing I will say is I am going to participate in the Mayor's Institute on City Design, which is a really cool project. And they were here visiting and really took them around downtown Tigard. And the city-owned areas, and talking about what the future could potentially look like from an outside firm. I think that could have some really great ideas. So I will present with, I think, 7 other mayors across the country on their different issue in November, and so it'll be really cool to see what they come up with. So yeah, there are some really awesome programs for mayors that communities can take advantage of and get free, essentially, really cool design ideas and assistance. And so I'm doing everything I can to take advantage of those, so we can get a really great new ideas and outside perspectives on Tigard. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question for you.
No. Okay.
Okay, Councilor Shaw.
Councilor Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor, for the report. Fantastic updates, and the November sounds cool. With regards to the Oregon Department of Transportation, just want to mention we're seeing it U.S.-wide that there is a decrease in gasoline tax revenue, both at the federal level and the state level. It really is predominantly not due to electric vehicles, really predominantly due to gas vehicles becoming much more efficient. Electric vehicles are a very small portion of the equation, but we are seeing an increase in energy efficiency of our vehicles, gas efficiency, and so we definitely know that in 10 to 20 years, there could be an element in which regards the electric vehicles be a component, but it really is right now just due to the efficiency of the gasoline vehicles. So looking forward to working with you and with the city and with ODOT on how we can come up with creative solutions on how we're going to fund our roadways. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilor Wolf?
Yeah, Mayor, I just am really excited to hear about your presentation, and just you'll have to follow up if that's a link or something that we can view or where that's presented. So would love to see that.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Okay. The next item on our agenda is the briefing on charter review, and we have the Strategic Initiatives Program Manager, Azelle, and City Attorney, Rahala. And I understand many members of our charter here today, too. Our Charter Review Committee, please come on up. Welcome. Do you want me to turn on my computer for you?
Since I'm sitting right here.
I know, but I still like to look too, so. Okay.
I just have to fly the session gates.
Yeah.
Because I took slides of them. I thought, paper.
We all
And-
set?
Yep, and
All
we are being asked to speak clearly into the mics.
All right. Good evening, Council. I am pleased to be joined by Kim Ezell tonight and distinguished members of our Charter Review Committee and audience members. So I'd like to ask our presenters to introduce themselves first, and then I'll introduce our guests as well.
My name is Derek Lawson.
Hi there, I'm Lindsay Washburn.
I'm Zachary Claremont.
And in addition to our presenters, we have Holly Fenton, John Cook, Margaret Doherty, Nathan Jackson, Dolly Speck, Karen Emerson, Councillor Jeanette Shaw, and City Recorder Carol Krager joining us as well. So thank you. We had the majority of our members came out tonight, so appreciate the continued dedication. Next slide, please.
Good evening, I'm Kim Ezell, Program Manager for Strategic Initiatives, and tonight we're going to do a full briefing on the entire process of the Charter Review, starting with the background, talking about how the process went. We'll talk about major and other proposed charter updates. There are some topics that are for further council considerations, and we'll talk about next steps and have time for questions throughout at the end of the presentation, but invite questions throughout as well. Next slide, please.
So we'll start off with some background as to how we got here. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of events leading up to today. So it starts all the way back in April of 2022 when Council adopted by resolution an interpretation of the Charter's definition of term limits. So as a refresher, under Oregon law, if a charter is ambiguous or unclear, the City Council is charged with interpreting and clarifying that language, and so that's exactly what happened in April of 2022. Later that year in the fall, as a result of that interpretation, Council decided there were other issues as well that were unclear with the Charter and that it might be worthy of a holistic review of the Charter so that we wouldn't find ourselves in a similar situation in the future. So that's what we did in December of 2022. Council selected the Charter Review Committee, and we kicked off our first meeting in January of 2023. Over the course of 8 months, the Charter Committee met 15 times, twice a month, and we finished last month, and this month brings us to this presentation to Council. So tonight you will hear the committee's recommendations to Council. And at the end of the presentation, we'll be looking for Council guidance as to whether to move these recommendations forward to the ballot. Also under Oregon law, charters must be approved by a vote of the people. And so this would be on the May of 2024 ballot, should Council give that direction. Next slide, please.
So this was just basically a community-led process, as Shelby explained beautifully. Next slide. Okay, so the committee members, Derek Lawson, I, Karen Emerson, Lindy Washburn, former rep Margaret Doherty, Nathan Jackson, William T. Simpson, and elected representatives, former Mayor Jason Schneider, Council Jeanette Shaw, former Mayor John Cook, Carol Krager, and non-voting alternates were Dolly Sprick, Holly Fenton, Zena Pinto, and obviously I was the youth representative. And there was 11 of us that were voting members of the Charter Review Committee. Next slide. And so basically our mission statement was to advance the governance of the City of Tigard through a comprehensive review of the city charter and provide recommendations for an understandable, flexible, and durable cornerstone for the future of our city. Next slide. Our committee framework. So the committee conducted a complete review of all clauses in the charter. All recommendations were made by consensus of 75%. Members were well prepared for the discussions through shared resources. Members also reviewed statutes, rules, League of Oregon, city publications, and information from 29 charters across Oregon. And all sources were nonpartisan and specific to Oregon when relevant. Decisions were also reached through a combination of large group discussions and breakout rooms for the meaty in-depth conversations. And for myself, as the youth representative for this Charter Review Committee, I felt like it was just amazing to even be part of this groundbreaking change, because Tigard's charter hasn't really been changed like this since 1962, and to come from a senior last year in high school to a youth representative making big changes in the city and helping represent people who normally aren't very represented, you know, children between the ages of 1 and 18. It's just really great to be part of this change. Next slide.
Thank you, Zachary. So there are two major proposed changes that we'd like to highlight for you. Next slide, please. The first one is the addition of 2 council seats. So currently there are 4 councilors and a mayor. We propose that we add 2 councilor seats, so there would be 6 councilors and a mayor. And the reason for this really is that Tigard has grown a lot since 1962, when the population was 1,800. Today we're at 55,000, over 55,000. So it's time for more representation, bringing in more lived experiences and knowledge to the council. And then, as Councilor Shaw pointed out to us, it would also help with the workload that you experience trying to be on several committees reporting back. So that was the reason for that. Next slide, please.
Given some of the perceived ambiguity in the current charter and just the language as it currently exists, the committee discussed some of the appropriate term limits and what that might look like, and then with a lot of considerable debate, as you can imagine, determined that the following would be well suited to the city. And just essentially no more than 2 consecutively elected or appointed terms of the council or mayor, no more than 4 consecutively elected appointed terms total. If you're appointed or elected and serve a term of less than 3 years, then that would not apply to the term limits, and then you would need a 2-year break of service to reset that calculation.
Next slide, please. So now we're going to walk you through other proposed changes to the charter. Next slide. The first one is making the charter consistent with state statutes. This is good practice, and also it's a lot of work to comprehensively review a charter. Some of these clauses change as there's changes to public records, processes. So if this is happening at the state level, it's easier for the charter to review up to the state, and this way you're always in compliance and don't need a comprehensive review anytime there are changes. So that was the reason for this. Next slide.
There's a lot on this one. So, you know, again, you know, as Lindsay mentioned, the growth of the city since 1962, the committee determined that the charter should clarify certain expectations of councilors, just as would pertain to conduct primarily. So one of those changes would just be including a no interference clause. The thrust of which is really just to establish what would be essentially a clear separation between the legislative powers and legislative powers of the council, and then the day-to-day operations of the actual employees of the city, like the members of the city manager, for example. Just no undue influence. Idea being that conduct should be that the council should conduct business in open for the most part, in an open environment. So what would be the effect of that is that the council has the ability to levy infractions on other members, up to and including removal from the council. Of course, one of the things that we included and we would want to stress is that it would require unanimous consent in order to actually remove a councilor from the city council, and I would assume it would have to be something fairly egregious. But What we did find as well is that this clause is fairly common across the state. It's not something that would be unique to Tigard should you implement it. Some just housekeeping items, just indicating that the council formally would state what their rules are, and then what they would govern. Again, penalties for infractions. Given the expansion, the proposed expansion from 4 to 6 members, we would say that council president term reduced from 2 years to 1, just to cause for that rotation to be more frequent, give more exposure. And then as far as what it eliminates, just eliminating the requirement that someone who wants to run for mayor must resign from their position, and then that amendment would also treat other councilors similarly for other positions. Next slide.
Next slide. So we're also recommending some requirements for office, and really this is to signify that we are looking for people who are community oriented and civically minded. So they are registered to vote and that they've been a resident in Tigard for at least 1 year. Next slide.
There's a lot on this one too. So really with regard to the future, this was something that was debated quite a bit among the members of the council, which was just how it is that we want to maintain the integrity of the document. So, in analyzing previous voter motivated or initiated charter amendments, what we found is that most, if not all of them, were confusing, generally speaking. They were difficult to implement. They were passed by very slim margins and generally on off-cycle and low turnout elections. Upon closer scrutiny, you can find that some of them are motivated by well-organized special interest groups, some of them that are outside of the city of Tigard. And beyond that, some of them in a shorter term period of what you might consider public hysteria in the case of like water treatment, for example, things that don't really hold up to scientific scrutiny when we look at it more closely. So what we thought would be an appropriate way to approach this is just to require that the future amendments that would be voter initiated, it would require that 60% of the voters approve. So the purpose, again, of such a requirement would be to protect what it is that we have done here and to have it also withstand the test of time, hopefully for another 60 years before we rewrite it again. So it wouldn't be altogether dissimilar from the United States Constitution with its own 2/3 requirement, an even higher level or bar to attain, to propose amendments for that. So we feel that that would be a good thing to keep intact. And I know there was some discussion about whether or not that was truly something that you wanted to proceed with. So I think I speak for the group as well in saying that we feel that it should be something that's included. We feel that the document we've arrived at is good and that it should be kept and maintained in its current form. And then beyond that, removing clauses, there's 2. One of them specifically is just whether or not we're able to distribute water from the Willamette for various uses. The committee consulted with various experts who came, addressed us, talked with us about modern water treatment processes. It is also not unknown that Wilsonville and Sherwood both distribute from that and are fine, as best as I can tell. So there's one other item here, which is that the city was previously, the mayor had been required to publicly oppose high-capacity transit, I believe in writing, although John Cook can clarify, in writing as well as to verbally state as such prior to, and this would be in dealings with the Department of Transportation, the Federal Department of Transportation, ODOT, Metro, all people who might be interested in discussing public transportation with us, and we were required to oppose it. So it should be recognized that this actually sunsetted. So it was already out of the charter, so whether we adopt the current one or the charter in its current form or we simply retain the existing one, regardless it's without that, but just for good, I would say housekeeping again, we wanted to let you know that we pulled it out for this one. And then just next slide, please.
The charter was also missing a preamble. So we wanted to add a preamble really for 2 reasons. One is to explicitly claim home rule authority, and the other was really to state our value. We spent a lot of time wordsmithing this short little 2 sentences, so I'd like to read it out loud to you all.
It feels a little loaded, given the giggles in the room.
We are all still friends. We, the people of Tigard, Oregon, are a community that recognizes the value of all individuals. We exercise our power to the fullest extent possible under the Constitution and laws of the state of Oregon and enact this Home Rule Charter. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, our committee members. So as you heard, our committee came to many difficult conversations and debates, but there were some areas where we did not come to consensus, so we wanted to bring those forward for council consideration. Next slide, please. So the first had to do with council compensation. The current charter language is in violation of ethics laws and is not how Tigard has been doing charter language or council compensation. So our recommendation is to amend the clause to direct council to adopt a process for reviewing council compensation via resolution or ordinance. And this is a direction that other cities around the state are also taking with regards to council compensation. The second item deferred to council has to do with the effective date of charter. So the two options were either in July 1 of 2024 or January 1 of 2025. Our recommendation is for July 1, 2024, which would allow for the 2 new councilors to be elected in the 2024 council election. This recognizes that once this is voted on in May 2024, we assume the electorate, if they pass this charter amendment, will want to see the changes that they have voted for go into effect fairly quickly, and waiting until the 2026 council elections just feels a little long. Next slide, please. The third has to do with a clause in the charter that says that an absence of from duties by a councilor would result in a loss of council seats. So the current charter says an absence from city for 30 days without council consent would lead to a forfeiture of a seat. We would like to amend this language to add that the vacancy must be declared by unanimous vote of other councilors. Like Mr. Lawson said earlier, this would bring our charter into parallel with other with a previous clause. So the no interference clause would also require a unanimous vote for a forfeiture of seats. So this would just provide a parallel structure across our entire charter. And the final recommendation that was not directly from the committee comes from is about the election of the council president. Our current charter requires that that election be by written ballot and is silent on the process. Our recommendation is to just remove the written ballot requirement, allow council to proceed through that election as they see fit. This is also would be parallel with most of the other charters across the state. They are often, if not always, silent on the how the election is done for the council president. And next slide, please. So next steps, next slide. So there was one other area that the charter committee recognized was not appropriate for charter, but did want to bring to council's attention in case there was a resolution ordinance that the council would like to pass. So one of our very first conversations was talking about how laws are enacted in Tigard. Currently, Tigard has a single reading for ordinances. Several other cities do have 2 readings, but Tigard's had single reading for a very long time, since 1982. There were some concerns that a single reading could limit the community's ability to provide comment on contentious or difficult topics. However, there was also the consideration that a single reading provides for a more efficient government. In discussions with the committee and as a group, we talked about all of the different ways that the staff, as well as the mayor as the presiding officer of council meetings, does encourage that public comment and would never constrain the public's ability to comment, but we did want to flag this as it was a significant conversation within the committee in case council is interested in pursuing a resolution ordinance addressing this concern. And next slide. So moving on from today, so today we are looking to council to provide some staff direction on moving forward with these recommendations and beginning a public information campaign that would go through this fall and winter, with the plan being that next February we would come back and ask council to refer the charter amendments to the ballot with a ballot title. From March through May, we would continue a public information outreach effort, and then this would be on the ballot in May of 2024. Next slide. And that concludes our presentation this evening, and we would love to answer any questions.
Thank you. First, I just want to say, you know, there are lots of different ways to serve your community, and this is probably like the meat and potatoes, right, of our city charter that hasn't been looked at since 1982 in totality, or 1962, sorry, in totality, and it's really, really important work, and you spent a significant amount of time doing that, and we're so grateful and appreciative of the work that you have put forward and really come up with what I think is a very cohesive, much easier to read charter where everything makes sense. And there are some wonderful updates, including referring to the mayor as a he. Not the case anymore, right? We need some updates. So I want to thank you all for the significant amount of time that you put into it. It's so appreciated. And then I just want to open it up to see if there are those 4 sort of general questions. And then I think just the notation at the end about the single reading for us to take under advisement in the future, but to see if there are any questions or concerns about council compensation, the effective date of the charter, absence from council, or election of the council president, the how. Are there any questions or comments based on some of the recommended ways to move forward? Councilor Wolf?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I was just going to kind of walk through the 4 sections real quick and give feedback. So just ditto to Mayor Lube. I want you all to know I appreciate just the time commitment. We kind of zip through a timeline, but I really recognize and appreciate the time that you all gave to do this thoughtfully and have great deliberations, I'm sure. And I loved, Lindsay, when you said we're still all friends. That means that you had some great conversations and we're keeping the core of what's important to the city in mind. So I did spend a lot of time trying to read through them, and you did an amazing job of cleaning up what's really core to a charter, and so thank you for that. So I'm going to just hop to the 4 questions because I felt like this has been a very thoughtful process from staff and from the committee, so I will just get to it. I agree with the compensation. I think this, how to best go about that, the only word I don't think it needs to be added, but for me, I would like an independent review. Because I find a council sitting their own compensation is challenging. So for me, I'd like someone else to have that kind of benchmarking work done and bring forward a recommendation. So that's my thought. Effective date, I'm great with July 1st, 2024. Don't have issue with that. And I also appreciate the absence on the duties leading to a council seat, 30 days without consent, and then to amend that there's a unanimous vote. I think that really opens up, there's going to be communication about it and conversations, and that we should all be taking this work very seriously. And I'm hoping that some of you all are inspired to run for some new council seats. And then, I know, it was my joke for the night. Election of council president, I don't have issue oh no, I jumped ahead to the 2 versus 1, and that's fine. And I also agree, Karen Emerson, she and I served on the Tigard-Tualatin School Board together, and I appreciate that sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable, but I appreciate that it's also a public conversation and dialogue. So I support that, and I think that's it. So thank you all very much.
Councilor Shaw, would you like to go through line by line?
Yes, thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you. I just want to appreciate the dedication of the Charter Review Committee and the committee members, the amount of time, the interest, and I think just mentioning Lindsay, we all agreed that once we got into those meetings, it was such a fast 2 hours of a learning experience and really positive dialogue and conversation. So again, just want to thank the committee members and our youth representative, Zachary, who really led that youth voice. So very appreciative. Glad that we're updating this since 1962. Mayor, yes, it should have something other than he. I do support the additional 2 councilor seats. I think it makes sense given our population to have 6 councilors and that it be citywide due to our population growth. Also, With regards to the council composition, I actually appreciate Councilor Wolf, your comment about independent. I think that'd be an important addition, and think that's important to have review. With regards to the absent of duties, I would agree with amending the language so that's a unanimous vote of the other councilors or of the councilors, and that we retain Tigard's single reading for ordinance, which of course has been since 1982, because this allows the community not only to provide comments, but also for us to be efficient in our councilor duties, and agree that it should be placed on the May 2024 ballot. And I concur with Councilor Wolf's joke that we hope that 2 new individuals run for the city council seat. So thank you, Mayor, very much. And again, I just want to applaud everybody who's in the room and who dedicated their time to this charter committee, and also to staff, both with Kim and Shelby. We could not have done this successfully without their assistance. So thank you very much.
I appreciate the jokes. I think the jokes are making the staff a little tense because staff cannot be political and the electeds can. So that's the defining line. Youth Councilor Vogel.
Yeah, I just want to echo what has been said. Thank you for all the work that's been done, and that you guys give an opportunity for youth voice, because I think that's very important to these influential changes being made. Overall, I would say that I agree with council compensation as well as the effective date of charter. I think that aligns best, and I agree with what's been said, as well as absence from council and election of council president, as well as the 2 new seats. I think that it's never a bad idea for new opinions and new experiences to come in, especially with the growth of Tigard. So I think that's amazing, and I really appreciate it again for all you guys have done. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'll go through council compensation. Yes, absolutely independent charter or independent compensation review. I think there's been some really great examples across the state and across the country. So putting that in the charter, I think sort of has that removal of a conflict of ethical interest. So that's really important. Effective date, really important, I think July 1. I can't imagine a community member who would say, yes, a new charter, and then would have to wait 2.5 years to see that change. Absence from council, I really appreciate the unanimous vote, because I think across the country we have seen these threatening behaviors really being weaponized, and it becomes much more political rather than an individual and whether or not they are fully participating, and it becomes an ideological thing rather than a participatory thing. So I think that was a really important thing to do. Election of council president, I actually felt very strongly to remove the ballot requirement. For me, it always sort of felt icky being the only thing that we voted on in what felt like secret. And it's something where these are uncomfortable conversations. We quite frequently have uncomfortable conversations, and that we owe it to the community to be able to stand up for the vote that we're taking, so a community member can ask us why if they want to be open about it. So I felt very passionately about that being removed. And the single reading seems fine to me. I don't know that we have had any complaints or feedback that individuals really haven't been able to give appropriate feedback, but I'm certainly open to it if there has been a history or consistent complaints about it not being sufficient enough time. So those would just be my thoughts. I know we are 2 councilors short tonight, but I don't believe we have heard any robust opposition to anything that's been presented, but I'll ask Kim, because I know you met with all of us individually, just to confirm that's the case.
That is the case.
Okay. So I think universally what I'm hearing is approval for the staff to continue to work on coming up with official language and targeting the May 2024 ballot for this.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council.
Yeah. Oh, and I look forward to all of you helping us spread the word. You thought your service ended.
Mayor, if I may,
Yeah.
This is loud. Sorry about that. I just want to go back to the charter review timeline screen that we had and really think through the process. And when the previous council made some of the decisions they did and asked the team to move forward last fall, that was a large task that's been referenced already here. And just to put together a process that was going to work, to think how we're going to select all of our community members, to make sure that we had the voices that you wanted at the table, to make sure we could bring in other voices that we don't always hear. and then to find the team that could lead it forward. And we've already recognized Kim and Shelby, but as everyone knows, they also led the Public Safety Advisory Board, and so they've gone through 2 of our most comprehensive reviews of things that we do in this community, and so kudos to them as well. And also kudos to the council for stepping forward and asked us to bring forward something that really is going to make a difference for this community. It's been referenced a few times with the charter that's now been brought forward. So appreciate all of the council's leadership as well in this, and we look forward to moving this forward to really, as we kind of kidded around before calling them charter chats with our community, but getting the community to start to understand all the work that you did, and so they realize as this gets to the ballot that they're well informed on the information that's in there and understand what the charter means for this community. So thanks to everyone in this room that's been participating in it. We appreciate it and look forward to the next step. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say, as the youth representative for the Charter Review Committee, I've had a lot of people from, you know, a young age, like in middle school or high school, that I've like talked to, and I've told them I've wanted to be a part of some sort of big change, or I want to help people in some sort of way, whether it be a politician or volunteer or whatever it may be. And almost all of them would be like, oh, well, you're not going to be a city councilor member. You're not going to be, you know, a charter review committee member. Like, you know, they just don't let people do that. Like, you have to either be like super rich or wealthy or like have some sort of like background. And I'm just going to tell you right now that you don't need any of that. You can just go straight into it and show your determination for how much you care about people. And it doesn't matter where you come from, you can make a big difference in whatever you put your mind to. I just want all kids to know that.
Thank you. I do know that we have many Charter Review Committee members in the audience, so I also want to open up if anybody would like to talk about their experience or give any feedback publicly. You're welcome to do so now too, or email us. You're welcome. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. The next item on our agenda today is the Downtown Reimagine update, and we have redevelopment project manager Farrelly and senior planner Warren here today. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Farrelly, redevelopment project manager, and also on the line is senior planner Skylar Warren, who will help jump in if I have trouble answering any questions on land use. Next slide. So we're here today to talk about the Downtown Reimagine project. That project is looking to, next slide. Next slide again. To make some recommendations on Tigard's land use plans, policies, and codes. This chart kind of shows that, you know, the local land use development code, comprehensive plan sits within a system. There's state and regional land use policies, and then as we move down to the local level, we control more and more of our land use, although we still have to operate within the statewide and regional plan policies. Next slide. Our project is really seeking to implement the Tigard Downtown Vision from 2020. And that's Downtown Tigard is seen as a vibrant, active, and welcoming city center at the heart of our community. It provides transportation, recreational, residential, and business opportunities that are accessible to everyone. Next slide. And pulling out those keywords there: vibrant, active, welcoming, accessible. These are some images that express those values. Next slide. So with the Downtown Tigard Reimagine project, there will be recommendations on the types of housing and businesses that will be permitted in downtown, what the street streets and buildings will look like, building heights and sizes, setbacks, things like that, and then the street and path improvements that will make downtown more connected to the rest of the city and within its boundaries. Next slide. So the area we're looking at is basically the city center TIF district with 3 additional areas added. The most significant being east of Hall Boulevard in the potential light rail station area. We also included the Tigard Public Library and an expanded area around Knoll Drive. Next slide. So there's 3 major tools that we have to shape our downtown. We've got regulations that are basically development code that says where development can take place, what kind of uses, what development should look like. We have incentives that can encourage the kind of development that we want to see, since we have the city center TIF district here. And then public investments. These are the things like building streets, plazas, public spaces that will entice people to come downtown and also entice private investment. Next slide. Next slide again. So briefly, here we are on the schedule. We kicked off in April of 2022. I'm going to talk about a couple of the public engagement events that we did in the next couple of slides. But in addition to that, we've also made 4 briefings to the Town Center Advisory Commission, made a briefing to Tigard Downtown Alliance, and we have another one scheduled next month. And then we also prepped the Planning Commission, since a lot of this will be considered by the Planning Commission before it comes to Council. We did a walking tour with them that Councilor Singh joined on. Next slide. So what we have heard, next slide, we started off with, in September of 2022, we did a round of language-specific focus groups. We talked to folks in Vietnamese, Arabic, and Spanish-speaking communities, and we gathered preliminary feedback when we asked participants about where they go in downtown and what they wanted to see in downtown. And the feedback we got is summarized here. For land use, there is interested in more dense and affordable development. There was mention that maybe the street maintenance fee could be adjusted to incentivize the use of shared parking. Desire for more kid-friendly amenities and businesses. Desire to increase visibility, wayfinding, and awareness of Faneuil Creek Trail connections. And a desire for more flexible setbacks to allow urban living room type spaces. In connectivity, there was interested in making more room for bicycles on Main Street in Burnham. Interest in this area where the Heritage Trail meets Main Street. Right now it ends at Rotary Plaza, so there's interest in extending that trail across Main Street safely and connecting up with another trail that already exists off Hall Boulevard. Recognition that Hall Boulevard is a really important connection and needs to be prioritized, the improvements there that are being recommended in a separate effort. And then realizing that it may take a long time to implement a new street connectivity plan, but it's important to get that right. Next slide. So in April of this year, we had a public workshop, the Tigard Public Library, had about 32 attendees, and got some more refined feedback. We showed a range of different concepts in land use and connectivity that we were thinking of, and got feedback on what people were most interested in. The kind of land uses that people want to see. This won't be a big surprise to people. They want to see more retail, groceries, and restaurants and drinking establishments. And people were not so much in favor of more self-storage facilities or auto-oriented uses. They thought that parking should be shared and that'd be more efficient to do it that way. Really like the sweet spot of 4 to 6 story buildings with active street frontages. They thought that placemaking and programming were really important, things like art and murals and events. Connectivity concepts, they really want to emphasize active transportation, but all modes need to be accommodated. Wayfinding is an important project, and then again, while it may take a long time to implement the connectivity plan, they thought that we should really go for more connectivity, more creating new street connections. Next slide. So the feedback that was received was kind of winnowed down or boiled down into these 7 criteria, and that 7 criteria was used to kind of weigh the different land use and transportation concepts. So those criteria are, downtown having unique character, being housing diversity, creating new destination and amenities, minimizing displacement of both residents and businesses, making downtown more visible, really appreciating the natural assets in Fan Creek that downtown has, and again, increasing connectivity to the rest of the city and within the district itself. Next slide. And these are the recommended concepts and strategies. Next slide. So the land use concept really enhances the current vibrancy along Main Street, continually focuses on retail and restaurants, prioritizes mixed-use housing, especially in the Burnham area, and anticipates that Southwest Corridor could come back, and we really want to anticipate that if it does, or be ready for it. Also want to connect or create important gateways along Hall Boulevard and Pacific Highway. And I would say that these recommendations are kind of a refinement of what we already have in our land use code. Right now there's 4 sub areas in the downtown, so this recommended concept increases that to 7, so getting a little more specific. So I'm going to start from the top left, and next slide, please. And that Center Street area, not that easy to see there, but it's kind of a commercial area that would allow for eventual more intense development, 2 to 6 story buildings. Next slide. Main Street, really want to encourage what's already going on there. It's that intense retail, restaurant, burgeoning district there, active ground floor uses, and allowing 1 to 6 story buildings. Next slide. A downtown neighborhood sub area that would have a wide range of infill housing options, apartments, row homes, civic spaces, 2 to 6 story buildings in height. Next slide. Burnham and mixed use, a little more high intensity there to recognize, we've made a lot of investment in Burnham Street and the Universal Plaza. Want to get more active uses going down there, and then heights here a little taller than the rest of the district in 4 to 8 story buildings, but there is a recognition that was mentioned by public feedback that we want those buildings to step down as they reach Fan Creek Park. Next slide. So the Pacific Highway Gateway, as a way to increase downtown's visibility, there would be buildings there that would have a real strong presence at the 4 corner intersection. 4 to 8 story buildings would be permitted there. Next slide. So this area, mixed use employment, it's kind of that 1 story flex space that's kind of down there in that knoll. Basically the same kind of uses, but allowing 2 to 6 story buildings. Next slide. And then the area that is proposed for the most change, I would say, is the Hall Gateway. And again, that is that light rail, that potential light rail station area that we want to anticipate You know, we don't know if Southwest Corridor is going to come, but if it does, we want to be ready and be ready with some really tall buildings, residential and employment buildings, and 6 to 12 stories is the proposed height limit there. Next slide. So with our recommended connectivity concept, this will create a well-connected and walkable block structure that'll really support new development, make it easier for people to get around. Those new street frontages will can be created with a mix of new multimodal streets, shared streets, and bike and pedestrian pathways. And again, we currently do have a connectivity plan that's very similar to this. This, I think, is a little more refined. It does simplify some things that I'll get into. But the main priorities here are to provide new connections to the Burnham area, allow flexibility and connectivity alignment, increase access to Fanner Creek Park and Trail, complete the Ash Avenue pedestrian crossing and the Tigard Heritage Trail crossing of Main Street, looking at maybe reducing the size of the Burnham Street and Ash intersection, and adding crosswalks to Hall Boulevard. Next slide. So the new street typologies, these are basically the design of the new streets that would be created. Currently in our development code there's 7. This would reduce it to 3. Multimodal streets, proposed paths, and shared streets. And I'll go through each of them. Next slide. So the multimodal streets are shown in red. These would serve the needs of all transportation modes, and want to keep speeds down to about 25 miles per hour. We would have on-street parking, much needed new parking for the downtown, and that also provides a physical buffer for people who are on the sidewalks. And the rights of way would range from about 36 to 60 feet, depending on the sidewalk widths. Next slide. So the proposed paths would really increase the connectivity without building out a full street. It would be non-vehicular access for walking, biking, and rolling. And the approximate right-of-way would be 10 to 24 feet. Next slide. And then shared street type, shown in green. There's really just one street there connecting Main to Hall. But that would be kind of a very low street, kind of a Woonerf idea, where everyone shares the same basic right-of-way, and traffic is slowed down by changes in surfaces and traffic calming. And those streets would be narrower than the other street, 30 to 42 feet. Next slide. So some recommendations for open space. It's really acknowledge that downtown's natural assets are part of what make it unique. As the area evolves, we want to enhance those natural assets and also improve connectivity to those assets. Next slide. So starting, Universal Plaza, we want to keep that going. We want to have more activation there and feature enhancements. Next slide. Fanner Creek open space and trails. We want to do things like, as was mentioned, the buildings would step down as they approach that area. Pursue projects that we're already kind of working on now, the Nick Wilson Plaza, and looking at lighting on the Fanner Creek Trail and a wayfinding as well, and also looking to complete that heritage trail that would go through downtown, extended through what's now the TriMet parking lot. Next slide. And looking for ways to connect all the open space that we have been building in the downtown. And finally, next slide. The Red Rock Creek Trail, we want to someday have an off street trail that would enable you to get from downtown to the Triangle. And so there are some recommendations there. Would require getting over the rail line and also Highway 217. Next slide. So the recommended housing strategies, we want to really focus on minimizing and mitigating any displacement. We do have a couple of regulated affordable housing projects, and that's the Knoll and the soon to open alongside senior housing project. But we'd also like to work with Washington County Housing Authority to see if there's a way to acquire some of this naturally occurring affordable housing or market rate of affordable housing that exists now in the downtown, and see if there's a way that those could be protected and converted to regulated affordable units. And then also supporting tenant protections through targeted outreach, referrals, and funding for service providers. Next slide. Some things, other suggested strategies would be if the TIF district puts some money into a project, that we include an affordability requirement of some kind. So that would be a strategy to get more affordable units. Then looking for ways to would incentivize mixed income residential and also affordable home ownership, and some recommendations on the mobile home community that exists in the downtown, looking for ways that any displacement that happens there could be mitigated. And next slide. So now we'd like to see if you have any questions or anything clarified. And if you go to the next slide, please. Some specific questions about whether the land use concept balances the right uses and intensities. Does the connectivity concept provide the right amount of access for all users? Does the open space strategy support the intended mix of uses and intensity in downtown? And does the housing strategy address the community's needs and support the other uses in downtown? And since we might be a little pressed for time, maybe focus on the first two, land use and the connectivity.
Thank you. Do we want to start with Councillor Shaw? Do you want to kick us off this time?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much for the report. Great concepts. A couple of questions, perhaps, Sean, if I could skip to the second one. Does the connectivity concept provide the right amount of access for all users? One item I was unclear about, thought I had been clear, but the terminology seems to have been changed, and that's the interest in changing street maintenance fee. And it's based on the quantity of commercial parking spaces. Not so much that is my question, but to incentivize use of shared existing parking for businesses. So I'm not sure what is meant by shared existing parking. And then also the concern that many of our business owners have said that there just is not adequate parking. I think we see that Sundays at Universal Plaza for the market. We see that certainly on Saturdays when folks go downtown, as well as Friday evenings. So just was curious about the connectivity concept. I think we've done a great job with regards to walking, with biking, but how does that enable folks who don't have access to bikes or walking or cannot do either, that they can still enable to park and utilize the downtown?
Yeah, well, so the comment about the street maintenance fee was that was an idea that was shared. It's not necessarily going to be a recommendation in the final plan. It could, I think it's an idea that's worth exploring, but it's not going to be necessarily recommended in this report. But the way the connectivity concept does address parking is by the creation of these new streets, breaking down these large block structures, is creating new street frontage and new places that people can park. So that's one way of addressing it. And there was one other point you had, Councilor Shaw.
Just about the adequate amount of parking for those who cannot walk or bike. Will they have adequate parking? So we're not we're not disfavoring those who are not mobile.
Right. So this again, basically focusing on land use and connectivity in terms of new street connections. Parking policy is that it's in the mix there, but I don't think we're really going to get any specific recommendations from this report. We continuing to work with the downtown parking committee to address these near-term concerns about parking, and so that's where that will be addressed. And I assume that new development that is built down here, some provision will be made for parking those. If the light rail is built, that would be a great way to get carbon responsible development built. But this report is more focused on land use and creating new street connections.
Great, thank you, Sean. And I definitely think long term, if we are to see light rail come to downtown with the parking structure, that's feasible, but that's some time off. So just want to make sure we're not, again, not favoring those who are not as mobile as some of us are. And then one last question, Mayor, if I may, with regards to the shared streets, if I'm looking at the picture correctly, cars and bikes would utilize the same shared street, and that the right-of-way width range would be 30 to 42 feet. Concerned about and understanding maybe speed will be slow, but very concerned about the concept that there's no protection for those who are bicycling, unless the picture is not as accurate.
Well, those kind of streets, they do have to be built carefully, while everyone will be sharing the same right-of-way. Keeping car speeds down is kind of the, it doesn't work unless that's done. So the traffic calming, the change in kind of materials that are used, I think basically most pedestrians will kind of walk on the side there, but there is the opportunity to walk in the middle when there's no traffic, and then cyclists, as a low speed street, I think cyclists are able to move in that same traffic.
Thank you, Sean. And perhaps, Mayor, just one last comment. I know we've completed almost complete few minor items on downtown Main Street. I think we have some learnings from that, and I hope we utilize those learnings for this future development, particularly when we're looking at shared streets. I think there were areas that were a little too narrow. We've had to go back and redo, but again, I hope we utilize that as a helpful learning experience as we move forward. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Youth Councilor Vogel?
Yeah, thank you for this information. I appreciate it. I actually had the same question as Councilor Shaw about the shared streets, just a little bit of a concern about, like, as you mentioned, like the traffic calming elements and just kind of what that looks like. And I appreciate your clarity on that. So I think with that, I'm still a little hesitant just with just thinking about the different elements there and thinking about lots of things going on. Other than that, I think that the land use concept and the connectivity concept I'm agreeing with, and I appreciate all the information.
Thank you. Councilor Wolf?
I appreciate Manager Farrelly, your time and the in-depth analysis of where we're headed. Really appreciate Councilor Shaw, your detailed questions. Agree. I also appreciate you bringing out Main Street as well as Youth Councilor Vogel bringing that up. I've witnessed, I think there's a lot of assumptions about bicycle speed as well as vehicle speed, that sometimes all don't come together and meet what we intend. So I think for me, it's probably more so as certainly a new learner, and I know I've raised these questions, is, as we talk about what's going to be private development investment or public investment means federal, state, or local, or tax increment. For me, it will help me process and understand even more so what needs to come first, or what would be a timeline, what would be a priority. And I think all that, Sean's going to come as we continue down this road, but that's going to help solidify some of these pieces for me when I understand a timeline or a rollout and what's required from what will be all our kind of partners in really seeing this executed. But really appreciate the plans, and that may be setting me aside and helping me kind of really put these puzzle pieces together that could really bring forward this plan. But it's very exciting, so thank you.
Thank you. I have a list of questions. So I actually don't know this off the top of my head, but how many stories, how tall is the tallest building in Tigard? What do we have?
It's Lincoln Plaza, which is 15 stories, 12 to 15.
Okay. I just, when we're talking about this concept and talking about some perhaps going up to 12 stories along Pacific Highway, I'm just thinking about what that may potentially look like and change, and also just trying to figure out, right? Like, I think perhaps talking about this 4 years ago is a very different conversation than talking about it now, because I think of when those buildings, and I think of the tower that we have, right? Like, it's office space. Nobody is building office space right now. So what are we imagining those floors to be? Are we thinking retail on the bottom couple of floors, or restaurants, and then it's all apartments from there? Because I think perhaps imagining that we're going to go that high vertical, like, it's not going to happen with office. So what is the intent? And then does it look strange because there's one 10-story building and nothing else around it? Like, it just, I think that sort of piece of it I'm very curious about. I do appreciate that it slowly goes downhill. I appreciate that it goes downhill towards Fanner Creek, but I hope that it doesn't just look like a weird, high story building here and there. And that in general, I like the general concept and the ideas, but I also know that we've been working really, really hard to simplify code and to really encourage building and redevelopment. And I'm just, I can't help but make the comment that having so many different specific layers depending upon which street and which area feels like maybe it's way overcomplicating, and people may not even bother with it because they can't figure out, depending upon which block they're on, what code they're going to be under. So I think that's just really concerning, because I continue to hear as we push that Oregon is one of the most challenging places to build anything, and adding additional layers feels like it could be making it worse and more challenging instead of more inviting in our downtown area. I do have some questions about roads. So I think you were talking about what narrow roads are, and I think we kind of have two different examples, right? The north side of Main Street is certainly narrower than the south side of Main Street, and it starts at 30 feet. So is 30 feet kind of the north side, and then the south side is a little bit bigger? Because I think it's hard to talk about in practice versus like seeing the reality of what the intent of a narrow street would be. Does anybody, that's a very technical question, and I understand that you may not have that. But I think just in general, talking in that way, our community would recognize what a narrow street could feel like if it's the south side of Main Street or the north side of Main Street. I appreciate the shared street concerns, because as a cyclist, I think, it's very, very scary to be out there with a driver who may be trying to cut through a shared street to make their way through. And I actually want to ask, have we thought about, instead of a shared street, truly just making it narrower and for pedestrians and cyclists only. And then pedestrians, you know, get half of the street, cyclists get the other half of really that main street, and then that could create an entirely different vibe, being able to have restaurants down there and those different sorts of things. So just one street, right? And then you would feel safe getting in and out of Main and that downtown area because there would be no cars on it.
So we do have proposed paths that would meet that definition. It's for cyclists and pedestrians only. And the shared streets, I do understand people's concern about that, but it's really going to be hard to drive fast down these streets the way there's examples of these in Europe, a lot of examples like that. So it's really, if it's designed correctly, thoughtfully, everyone is operating at low speed, and they can be safe. But I do understand the concern, and I think there's a way that can make it more enticing for pedestrians to stay kind of close to the building, as is shown in the diagram. Whereas leaving the shared area as a potential for pedestrians to be in, but they'd probably prefer just all things being equal on this side.
I just think about, if the intent is really, to have vehicles slow down. I mean, I do hear people who are being forced to drive in a different kind of way, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing on Main Street, but we may get to the point where people are so frustrated that they're not going to come down at all. And I certainly don't want to do that to our businesses. And I'm really starting to think about, like, instead of a shared street, truly making it pedestrian and bike. And can you imagine how many people would feel comfortable walking around down there and biking down there without fighting against a car? So I want us, if there's additional support, and again, this is just me, like exploring that one of those streets truly is, because if our goal is to be one of the most, a very walkable, healthy community, I think that would be a big statement towards that. But if anybody disagrees with me, please speak up, because I'm certainly pushing in a direction.
So this would be a major street that's limited to bikes and peds rather than the paths that are more for connectivity purposes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I get you.
Councilor Wolf?
I wouldn't be opposed to exploring that further. I mean, I think there are some businesses or activity that removing cars, automobiles altogether would be challenging. And so I appreciate what you're trying to get to and kind of creating that, but it's also where would cars be that they could park and then walk and really embrace and take advantage of our downtown area. So what would that look like if they're just trying to get to the post office, drop something, and leave? So I'm not opposed to it, but I think it probably to pursue it and have a deeper conversation about what might that look like.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's there's multiple factors that go into it, but I definitely think that would be an idea, especially because we want to be appealing and we want to work on walkability as a community. So I think that I definitely would agree with that, but it needs to be looked at more. So just
for sure. Yeah. Councilor Shaw?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I certainly think it's a concept worth exploring. I know there's some businesses there that need to be open, at least have access to 24 hours, so that could be problematic. So we'd really want to look at those businesses, but certainly worth investigating.
I do want to emphasize, maybe I didn't make it clear, that these are new street typologies. So Burnham Street, Hall, Main Street, they're kind of stay the way they are. This would be for new streets only, these proposed typologies.
I will also ask, I know that Council President Hu and Councilor Singh probably, especially this presentation, to talk to them and receive their feedback directly, because I think this is too important, especially Council President Hu has been asking for this, so to meet with him. Do you feel like you got the direction you needed or the comments?
I do, and I have one more slide.
Oh, okay.
Next slide. So just to, we will be coming back. Next slide. To council, we're going to have a final report that'll encompass the land use recommendations, connectivity recommendations, policy recommendations, looking probably January, February to come back with that. And then what would implement this plan is the transportation system plan, the development code, comprehensive plan amendments, and those will be coming probably in the latter half of 2024. Also amending our metro town center boundary is something that we also is proposed to do. So those will be legislative changes. Some of those, the comp plan and development code and TSP, going through the planning commission and coming to the city council for final decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the National Community Survey results, and we have Senior Management Analyst Hendricks and Management Analyst Richardson here to present.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nicole Hendricks, and I'm the Senior Management Analyst in the City Manager's Office, and I'm joined tonight by Alex Richardson, Management Analyst, also in the City Manager's Department. So we're excited to be here tonight to share some key findings from a community survey that we just conducted in Tigard not too long ago, and just get your reactions and any questions that you might have about the survey. So next slide, please. We last conducted a community survey about 8 years ago in 2015. That was from Riley Research, and it was focused mainly on community attitudes. For this, sorry, next slide, please. For this survey, we worked with a company called Polco, using their standard survey called the National Community Survey, and this was developed in partnership with the National Research Center. So that center has been around for many years, and the goal of the survey is to focus on livability of community. So what you might see on the right-hand side in the next slide, or maybe in your paper packets, is this visual. It's a graphic that shows these 10 different facets of what they consider to be a community livability. So it's things like safety or economy, mobility. And as you can imagine, trying to cover those 10 facets in a survey it creates a lot of questions. And so the survey is about 6 pages long. So thank you to anyone who received a survey and took the time to complete it. We've enjoyed learning about what you've had to say, and I know council's curious as well. Tonight we're just going to cover general kind of themes and key takeaways of the survey results rather than dive into each of those key facets. And just a little bit about the survey. So the way that the questions were set up was that they were primarily ranking style questions. So, and that was related to like core services. So the survey would ask, how would you rate X service? And then someone could say excellent, good, fair, poor, etc. I mentioned the survey's been around for a while. It's been conducted in over 600 different cities across the U.S., and it's the same standard set of questions. So that's unique because it allows us and other cities who opt in to the survey to compare their responses to other cities. And this benchmarking just shows if Tigard's below national average, above, that kind of thing. So it's just interesting to see kind of where we fall. We also did opt into adding just a couple custom questions that we'll talk about a little later on in the presentation. And last little bit, we did have the survey translated into Spanish, and it was available online. We got a limited number of Spanish responses back, so that was an area that next year we're looking to improve participation on moving forward, and we have some ideas around that as well that we'll talk about later. So next slide, please, and I'll hand it over to Alex.
All right, thanks, Nicole. Hello, councilors and mayor. So this survey was conducted from April 26th through June 6th, or April 25th through June 6th, and all households were eligible to participate. However, the households that were selected were randomly chosen, and those were selected using all zip codes serving Tigard, and then addresses were delimited against exact Tigard boundaries. And then from there, that random selection, the birthday method was used to select which member of the household completed it. So whoever had the most recent birthday. So that was just a step to ensure that it was completely random. So 2,800 in total were mailed. 4%, as you can see, were returned due to vacant address, which is in line with the average. And 381, excuse me, were completed, which is a 14% response rate. And that is also typical for the National Community Survey. There were a few different tiers, kind of, or stages of distribution. So first there was a postcard mailing that just let folks know to expect the mailed survey to come. The second kind of phase was a cover letter with the printed survey. People could complete the printed version or they could complete it online. And then there was also a follow-up reminder. So people had several chances to see this and respond. And then we also did add on an open participation period. So anybody who wanted to could take the survey. So of course those were self-selected. Those weren't chosen at random, you know, through the scientific methods that Polco uses, but it did allow for anybody who was interested in giving feedback to give that feedback. So we published that link in the city newsletter. We provided that link, and as well as paper surveys for people to fill out at the farmers market. We had a drop station at the library. We posted about it on all of our socials. And the other thing to note is you'll see the unweighted, weighted, and target table on this page. So this was a representative sample of residents because the results were weighted to match the demographic profile of adults in Tigard. That is something that Polco does across the board. And so you can see that, for example, 8% of respondents were between 18 and 34. The target, when comparing to Tigard's population, is 27%. So those responses were actually weighted 27%, and so on for race, renting or owning, housing type. You can read on through the list. So that provided a more representative and holistic perspective on survey responses. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the key findings. I guess overall we did well. I think people enjoy living here. I think people are enjoy a high quality of life and are pleased with city services. So 8 and 10 did offer favorable ratings for the overall quality of life. There's also much more detailed information. You'll see if you read the whole report, it's broken apart it's broken by the facets of livability, but there's also kind of like an overall section at the beginning. So overall perception of all of these different factors and then a much deeper dive into each one. But just as kind of the general thrust is 8 and 10 offered favorable ratings. A few other takeaways that we'll go into more depth about. Economy was healthy. There are some areas for growth, and I will say that the vast majority of the results of the markers in the survey rate alongside the benchmark. And I don't think I mentioned this before. The benchmark is used against all 600 communities that have been surveyed, and it's actually a differential of 10 percentage points more or less than that benchmark score. So for example, if the benchmark is 55% agree that our drinking water is great, which is actually much higher than that, then if we are 64%, or if the benchmark is 64%, then we're considered similar. So it has to be kind of more than 10 points above or below the benchmark to be considered higher or lower, kind of in terms of how to place our residents' perception of a particular facet. So that's just a little bit of background there. So some of these numbers are a little bit lower, but again, keep in mind that they're similar to the national benchmarks. 50% rating employment opportunities as excellent or good, and 42% feeling that downtown is vibrant. When it comes to utilities, drinking water was one of those kind of shining moments. 88% think of our drinking water as excellent or good. And power, utilities, sewer, garbage, those all rated in line with the national average. And then another thing that we wanted to point out, of course, we have the levy coming up, going to voters soon. And safety is really important to residents. I guess that's not a surprise, but 9 in 10 say that that feeling of safety is essential or very important to them and their quality of life in Tigard. So people really want us focusing there. But at the same time, they feel safe. So they feel safe, but they maintain that having that safety is a priority. And there's more detail about that in a future slide. I think that's all for that one. Next slide, please, and I'll hand it back over to Nicole.
Thanks. Yeah, one thing I wanted to add just about that demographic weighting too, something we talked about is just how do we get closer to that true representation of folks rather than having to weight so heavily. And so a concept that we're wanting to explore is maybe considering focus groups of demographics that were less represented naturally, and then maybe in the off years, because we plan to do this survey every other year, maybe in the off years do more of those focus groups and get more direct feedback from those groups. So that's just something that we're considering, but I think it might help us get to more of that representation that we're looking for without weighting. So we did add a custom question that I mentioned earlier that asked about our city council goals. So we have 4 city council goals related to addressing community impact on climate, enhancing community safety, modernizing and improving our city services, and reducing houselessness. And so the question that we asked was just how important to you are these goals, just to get a sense of how are people feeling about these. Overall, as Alex kind of alluded to, enhancing community safety was identified as the most important goal out of the 4, just with 52% saying it was essential, and another kind of 45% bulk saying it was somewhat to very important. So also related, we had 73% of folks say that the overall feeling of safety in Tigard was good or excellent. And so also similar, sorry, a lot of data points. We love the data. That's why we're in bright colors, like keep people like interested. No. But just along the same lines, we had residents give a 73% rating of quality of police and sheriff services, which was a little, it's strong, but it was a little lower than like public safety as it relates to fire or ambulance. So just things to consider as we move forward. And then respondents were generally supportive of modernizing and improving city services. That is supporting facilities that are more resilient, safer, more cost-effective for taxpayers, as well as our new software systems. More broadly related just to city services, we wanted to pull a couple items. There was a lot of interest in increasing adult educational opportunities, and so that's something for us to think about how we create more of those opportunities. And then also worth noting that our public library services were rated highly. 92% said that those services are good to excellent, which I see head nods, so I'm like, yeah, we know. So it's good to hear that. For addressing climate change, 31% said this goal was essential. 31% said very important. Related to this goal was around Tigard's air quality. So and more were all in line with the national benchmarks. And then lastly, reducing houselessness. That was the second highest kind of council goal prioritized for level of importance. And just related facts from the survey said that cost of living was rated low, as was availability of affordable quality housing. So both of those areas there's a lot of opportunity to ensure that we can get people housing and to stay in housing. And so that's just an area that we have focused on and will continue to focus on. Next slide, please. All right, switching gears a little bit to just kind of overall image and communications. So Tigard's reputation 74% said that it was good or excellent, and a majority also said that the quality of our public information was good or excellent. We had 58% say that we were good or excellent at being open and transparent, and a little bit lower saying that we were good at informing residents about issues. So I think there's definitely opportunity here to work on just making sure we're open and transparent and informing residents. And so how might we do better at informing? Well, we did create a custom question asking how much of a source are different venues for getting information? Like how are you getting information? And what we heard was that our city newsletter, it's called Cityscape, it's an email newsletter, which has a listserv of like over, I think it was almost 35,000 people, so it reaches a lot of people, was one of the primary sources of how people are getting information. Also physical direct mail, or something that shows up in your mail, was another major source. And I think this was evident in some of the things that we tried out this summer with like our summer events flyer and Tigard Life. We heard a lot at the farmers market being like, it's so nice to have it all in one. Or when we asked like board and committee members, like, how did you hear about this opportunity? They'll say the newsletter. So it's kind of resonates with what we're seeing. Secondary sources of information are our website and local media outlets. And then some minor sources of information are public meetings, city team members, social media, and word of mouth. We also asked folks what actions they take a few times a week just related to communications, and checking email and checking internet from your cell phone was happening most frequently out of the options listed there. That's a little bit about communications, and I'll hand it off to Alex.
Thank you. Okay, so diving a little bit deeper into inclusivity and participation, obviously equity is one of our top drivers, one of our top goals for the city. So we, based on that, we wanted to get a better sense of, do people feel like we are including them? Do they feel like we're reaching them? And there is a range. So we have great customer service, 77%. 70% of the
Next slide, please. Sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't say that. Thank you, Nicole.
You're good.
70% do feel that the city does a good or excellent job at valuing residents from diverse backgrounds. Obviously, since we just adopted the Racial Equity Action Plan and the Declaration, I'm really interested to see how that changes in the coming years. I'm hoping that that number goes up. I also feel like the Charter Review Committee is another really visible piece that will hopefully reach most residents as they have to vote on it. Things like that will, I think, continue to demonstrate, yes, we do invite public participation every step of the way, but the more different opportunities that we give to do that, I think, can only be a positive thing. So now that we're back to doing this, hopefully every 2 years, I'm really interested to see how these numbers shift in particular. 53% say that Tigard does an excellent or good job at welcoming resident involvement. So again, I think committees and boards are one really important way to do that. This also brings to mind, we've made some internal changes in how we handle board and committee applications, much of that led by Nicole, and doing some alignments and things. So I think that is another way that we're kind of opening up more to the city. 57% say that we provide opportunities to participate in community matters. And then resident connection and engagement is good or excellent. That number is a little bit lower at 46%. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me was 20% volunteered time to a group or activity, and that one, as it says, was a little bit lower than the national benchmark. I'm not sure what the reasons are for that. I definitely think that that's something that we can look at more, and I would be interested to. This is a smaller example, definitely, but the idea to have the graffiti abatement program being volunteer-led, that's something I'm working on right now, and we'll probably come to you again soon for an update. That is one way, just continuing to find additional ways to involve people. And that question wasn't specific to volunteering for the City of Tigard initiatives. That was volunteering in general. So that also makes me think of what are ways that we could potentially, shine a light on different opportunities through partnering with our nonprofits, you know, can we add some communications efforts in our social posts, things that TIAC does where we're really reaching out to the community. So I think that 20% seems a little bit discouraging, but I also think that there's like a lot of low-hanging fruit. So I feel like we can definitely up that number in the next 2 years. It's kind of a personal goal of mine. And I think that's all I have for that one. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Nicole. Next slide, please.
Great, thanks. So a little bit about kind of next steps and things we've been working on for the survey. So we've been reaching out to different team members. We just shared an all-team presentation yesterday, this information, and just working to figure out how do we use this information to help inform decisions and inform how we do things. So I've really enjoyed getting to dive into it, and I think there's other teams who are really interested. We've met with the communications team to dive more into that aspect as well. And with those other 10 facets, there's a lot more conversations to be had. So, working on building upon those findings and developing different communication strategies and things like that. As we mentioned before, the survey's planned for every other year. The other area that we're kind of looking to improve is we had that open participation portion for 2 weeks at the end, but the responses were kind of low, and I don't know if that's because we did require in the beginning people share their address to make sure that they were a Tigard community member. So just thinking about, well, you know, maybe it's a question in there. If it encouraged people to respond more, maybe we open it up but ask, you know, are you a community member? Or different ways to explore that to increase participation there. And then mentioning earlier just the idea of these like focus groups to kind of reach people who weren't, who we didn't hear from directly. So
Can I add something too?
Yeah, go for it.
Just kind of related to some of our communication methods, we're also developing a flyer that kind of has, and it'll be online of course too, that lets the public know what our results were, some of the key takeaways, as well as kind of calls to action that align with those. So volunteering, for example, did you know we have all these wonderful opportunities to volunteer? Learn more about our water, subscribe to the Know Your H2O newsletter, you know, just lots of different opportunities to kind of use this as a springboard to fill in some of those gaps for people that are especially interested. And also, didn't hear if you mentioned this, but going to individual departments as we can to present these findings so that we can really allow, you know, the subject matter experts to dive deep into their specific areas of livability that align with what they're doing in their day-to-day work.
Thanks for adding that. And that reminded me that the full report is available online right now. So that's on our website. If everyone's really curious and interested in data, feel free to dive into that report. And if you have any questions, you can let us know. We're happy to answer. So that's it for us. Thanks.
Thank you. I will open it up to questions from counselors, youth counselor? No? I mean, it's a lot of information. Yeah. I think I have looked at the big packet, and it's really, it's fascinating. But I think it's, you know, we hear from different varieties of our community members, and it's really helpful to get this somewhat kind of anonymous general feedback to check in from hopefully people that we don't always hear from that say, yes, you are on the right track. I like living in Tigard, you know, the services are good. And I think that's the general feedback. There's certainly some areas, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm curious about the volunteering thing because I hear much more from our community that they're volunteering. So maybe it was just a sample, but really helpful information. So yeah, Councilor Wolf.
So thank you both. I was one of the random participants.
Oh, nice.
And I'm part of the 14% that returned it. So I do think it was a commitment to do it, and so obviously I had a vested interest to complete it. So I do wonder if there's a way to say what are those priority components. So maybe some of that open time to have people give input, because to sit down and do the whole piece. I actually did the paper one because I could work a little bit, walk away, and I probably could have saved it online. But I do think it's really amazing information. Thank you for the listserv. Is 35,000. That's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
And I just think about back to communication and that it's electronic. What can you link to drive people back and get information? So thank you for sharing how that impacts. I just think that's a tremendous opportunity. And on the volunteering piece, I just wonder, we have so many wonderful boards or committees, but that's that extended commitment. So those one-off opportunities that are promoted maybe at a higher level, and maybe that's how you hook more people, like, oh, hey, that was fun, so I want to do something else. And then just today I can commit 4 hours and then, grow from there. Maybe it's, twice, or then maybe I can serve on a committee and commit once a month. But no, great information that I think is important as we look to our public safety findings. And I just appreciated the breakdown on the council goals and things that we should reflect on. And, still at, 74% around reducing houselessness, and, the concern that I think some of the things we heard campaigning are still, consistent in the goals that people care about and it matters. And just thank you for the presentation and the information.
Councillor Shaw.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and appreciate the report, Senior Management Analyst Hendricks and Management Analyst Richardson. Question, and I'm sorry if that was in the handout that was provided. You had mentioned the 20% volunteer time to group work activities lower than national benchmark, but I don't think I heard what the national benchmark was. So if you happen to have that number, that would be great. And if not, you can get back to me on that later too.
Yeah, if it's okay, we'll get back to you on that stat. We'll check an email.
Yeah, no problem. And again, to appreciate, I was fortunate, was not one of the chosen ones, or I would have been the 14%, but look forward to having this done every other year. So thank you, and thank you, Mayor.
City Manager Reimer? Oh, I thought you were, got it. Thought you were waving me down. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have no non-agenda items or an executive session, and so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All of those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you so much. Good night, Tigard.
Thank you.